Hello there, good evening, and welcome to Spectrum Debate number 14. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Google+, or even on our newly launched website, spectrumdebates.com, you are very warmly welcomed. Tonight we will be debating a variety of topics chosen by our guests, whom we shall meet in a moment. But as ever, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your views. We want you to send in questions or points to challenge each of our guests on our topics tonight. You can do so using the hashtag SD14, which appears here on my screen, and you should be able to see it, I hope. And I'll do my best to put all of your points and questions to our guests, and to let all of our other viewers know what you are thinking. If you are watching on Google+, you can also use the applause app, which tells us how much you agree or disagree with what is being said at any particular moment. And a new thing this week, at 9 o'clock over on spectrumdebates.com, a poll is going to be launched, which will ask you who your favourite debater from tonight was. And of course, don't forget, with our new website, which only went live yesterday, we want bloggers. Whatever your view, from wherever you are on the political spectrum, you are very welcome to blog for us. Just get in touch and let us know. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to each of our guests, or at the very least, the guests that we currently have with us, as we are lacking one. Our first guest is Andy Emerson, who is hailing to us tonight, I think, if I remember correctly, from Cornwall. Andy, you're in the northeast again, are you?
No, I'm in Argyll.
Argyll. Oh, he's all over the place, is Andy. Well, Andy, a native of the northeast, and he's now worked at both ends of the country. He is a member of the Liberal Democrats, and certainly on the Liberal rather than the Social Democratic end of that party, if I'm correct. And Andy is going to tell us now what his general topic is tonight. Andy.
I'm going to talk about the SNP and the rise of the SNP, and particularly the damage that it will do to Britain and the Union.
That is great. Thank you very much indeed. Andy, of course, was one of our original guests on our certainly on our pilot, and I don't think he made it onto the first broadcast, but we're glad to have you on. Our next guest is a new guest to us. It's Paul Whiffin. Good evening, Paul.
Hello there. How are you doing?
Nice to see you. Now, Paul was, I believe, a candidate for the European Parliament for an Independence from Europe party, which garnered over 1/3 votes. He's a gentleman.
250,000.
250,000 votes.
Let's not overstate it.
It's not insubstantial, though, for anyone to get 250,000 votes. With a substantial CV behind him, and he is tonight, despite his globe-trotting background, broadcasting from London to us. And what is your topic tonight?
Well, I was trying to think of various different things, and then I just saw a 20-minute advert for wind farms on BBC Country File, which has got me back on my hobby horse of invented global warming. So that should wake a few people up and rattle their cages.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And our final guest is another returnee and one of our original piloters as well. It's Sam Baxter, who's hailing to us from down the road in Warrington. It's a proper Cheshire set we've got here tonight, isn't it, Sam?
It is.
Yes, we've all got our Bentleys outside, haven't we?
Although I see you're
oh, yes. Sam is a member of the Conservative Party, a council candidate, and is working hard for the re-election of his local MP, David Mowat. There are other candidates available in the Warrington South constituency. And Sam, what would be your topic tonight?
My topic sort of influenced by the events of the past few days, really. Do we think that SYRIZA have hit a roadblock already?
Thank you very much.
In their attempts to Greece.
Great, thank you very much. And our final guest, who we hope will be rejoining us imminently, is Joe Pattinson, who is also a returnee, but appears to have had a technical issue, and he'll be talking about the rise of populist groups in Europe, including the National Front in France and Pegida in Germany. Joe, of course, according to the vagaries of our system here, the automatic laser selection process was to be our first topic. However, we're going to have to reselect, and I do think we might as well go with Sam rather than going for the vagaries of the selection here. Is that okay with you, Sam?
Yeah, it's fine by me.
Lovely, because, well, without further ado, Sam, and Joe is here. We'll give them time to settle in. Sam, open the debate, please.
Well, like I said, my topic just influenced by the events of the past few days. We saw Yanis Varoufakis on his trip around Europe, trying to draw up support for his plan. I think it got support from the Adam Smith Institute rather strangely, but it's not really got any support from any European governments. Angela Merkel's not happy with it. The EU as a whole doesn't really want to restructure Greece's debt in any way whatsoever. It doesn't seem to be making any concessions. And in the case of Greece against the EU, or Greece against the world, as it must feel like for SYRIZA, it doesn't seem like they're going to get their way, and it seems like they're going to turn out to be a massive disappointment so soon after being elected to be the government of Greece. I suppose following on from that, the question is whether Greece's position in the euro can be maintained. It's not something I can really make a call on at the moment. Just the debate now, though, after the events of the past few days, just seems to be about how long they can carry on going tit for tat before they seem to be arguing about just for arguing's sake now. It's clear that nobody's going to give way.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Can I just ask you, first of all, before I open it up to the other panellists, what would you say is the main reason that SYRIZA, a party that really didn't exist on anyone's register or radar just a couple of years ago, has now managed to win the Greek election? I mean, what is the cause of that?
I think it's just Greece's situation was so unique in that the austerity measures that it had to go through were just so more harsh and painful compared to any other European country that's implemented austerity. Parties like SYRIZA, okay, they're not extreme in the sense that you'd normally associate with that word, but that they are, certainly their economic views. And you've got people who are, openly Maoist, that nice chairman Mao in SYRIZA. Parties like that who know how to appeal to such a feeling in a country and really build on that. Parties like SYRIZA, that's what they do. That's how they've managed to do it.
Thank you very much, Sam. I'm going to open it out to Andy in just a sec. The first issue that someone's raised here, Return Bull at Blue Liberal 1. Hello again. SYRIZA are right that Greece needs debt relief and less austerity, but it also needs radical free market reforms. Is he right, Andy?
Yes. I can do it in one word. Yes, yes it is. I mean, it is perfectly understandable. I think it's right to point out that it is sort of perfectly understandable why Greece has done so. With the country in such a mess, I mean, in dire economic need, I'm totally unsurprised that a group like, like a group of ragtag leftists have come to power. But I think Blue Liberal is right that what Europe needs to do is look at what it's doing to Greece, look at how Greece has reacted, and take maybe possibly look at a haircut for Greece, look at some debt relief, because otherwise we're going to end up with more extremes popping up all over the world, over Europe, which I think Merkel and Co would ideally like to avoid.
I mean, we're seeing it already, though, aren't we, Andy? In Spain, Podemos has appeared from nowhere and currently is well in the lead in Spanish opinion polls for their next general election, whereas the current government there, the Popular Party, has collapsed from something like 44% to 21% in the polls. So it's already happening, isn't it? Is it not too late?
No, absolutely not. I'm not saying that the rise of different parties in different countries offering people an alternative is bad and that it should be stopped. But I mean, what we can see with sensible action is sensible parties with a sort of the only sensible outlook, the only ideology that works in sort of modern world, sort of the liberal outlook can come to the forefront and deal with the problems sensibly. It's not too late.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Joe or Paul to join in 1 second. Just a few of the comments that we've had so far. John at Les Fox, another former guest of ours. Break up the euro, brackets, and the EU. Long live SYRIZA. Chris G at Chris G0000. Hello again. Greek government has just announced it wants to reopen the public TV broadcaster. Greece is detached from reality, and SYRIZA is doomed to fail. Dylan Morris, another former guest, Steak and Starbucks. SYRIZA's victory spells disaster for any agenda of extreme austerity across the EU. Cutting the state too quickly will end in tears. And John adds, how is Maoism not extremism? All options are painful, but the least painful is leaving the euro. So he agrees with what Blue Liberal said before. It's a very good point from Ian, which I'll bring in a moment. Joe, Paul, either of you want to have a word on this?
Well, I think most of you have got your telescope the wrong way round. The EU has hit a roadblock called SYRIZA, which represents this strange thing the EU's not very interested in, democracy. So the EU stomped into Greece, removed elected officials, put the Troika in place, told them that they all had to tighten their belts, which ended up with pensioners committing suicide when they found they had no. And what has happened is a return to normal democratic practices. Now, SYRIZA have all the cards because they can just say, we're leaving the euro, which is what the EU fears most, because then it will collapse like the house of cards it is. It's an invented currency that has no grounding in reality. Any idiot who's done one term of economic theory will tell you that you cannot have a shared currency without moving money around in the way that the Germans object to so vociferously because they spend so much time at work they've forgotten to have any fun. And so the Germans don't want to send money to Greece. If the Germans won't send money to Greece, the euro will collapse. It is just a matter of time. And when it goes, Portugal, Spain, Italy, and possibly even France will be running for the door as fast as they can, because then they'll be able to do what all these economies need to do, devalue their currency. They're all tourism destinations. It's their number one thing. And the Germans have stopped going to Greece. The Germans have stopped going to Portugal because it's too expensive. They all bugger off to the countries that aren't in the EU anymore. They're all in the Balkan states now. They're all in the, up and down the other side of the Adriatic, spending all their money there because, oh no, it's too expensive in Greece and Portugal anymore. And that is the reality of this situation. Until Greece gets the drachma back, the situation will just get worse and worse, and all SYRIZA have to do is dig their heels in, and the euro will come tumbling down.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, you've had some supporters on Twitter so far. John Mousley says, round of applause for that man.
Thank you.
Chris G says, the Greek situation demonstrates how incompatible the euro is with democracy. You can no longer, the party, though, can no longer deliver a growth manifesto. And also, actually, you've sort of given an answer to the one given, the question posed by a confused ninja, by Ian. How would the EU cope with Grexit? Would it endanger the EU and maybe give weaker economies more power? You've given a very interesting answer on that. Now, Joe, I don't know if your view is any different to what we've just heard from Paul.
Well, you'd be correct on the point of tourism being the main interesting factor, because you look at the latest candidates as well to join the EU. I can give an example of Montenegro. There is a growing and attractive tourist industry there as well.
Yes, but the EU will soon kill that off.
Of course. I was just saying that the tourism is the main factor, but they don't take that on board. But underlying thing that will last from this is the unique circumstances that will lead to long-term uncertainty, and the consequences will be felt. There's a possibility of recession, maybe, and of course corruption needs to be sorted out, especially in Spain. That's not really a link, but that's more of a link to what Gareth has said. That's why Podemos has risen. But obviously the circumstances need to be sorted out, especially for the long-term consequences of things. Of course, the euro is the issue at hand here. It's the fluctuation clause. The reason for this circumstance mainly is the fluctuation, and the value of the euro in Greece is more than it should be, let's say, in Germany. So that is really the main cause of it. But the long-term consequences are uncertain, and that strikes fear among many, I would think.
Thank you very much, Joe. A few more comments that people have made on Twitter, and you seem to be incredibly popular here, Paul. You've hit several people's happy nerves by the looks of it. Loud cheers for Paul, someone's tweeting here. Ian adds, the UK can cope with a single region having economic troubles as the rest is there to absorb the impact. But the EU can't without greater political integration. These problems will never go away as it is the EU versus them. Yes, and an awful lot of people saying, well done, Paul, here. And Leon French, who was on with us last week, hello Leon, is saying that he hopes he's not the only one who sees SYRIZA as fantasists. So, yeah, Andy, you wanted to talk a little about the Greek exit, about Grexit.
Well, I think if Paul is being very popular, I'm about to make myself very unpopular.
Perhaps we just haven't awoken the pro-EU side yet, so let's see if you can wake them.
I am pro-EU, and I will make no bones about that, but I've never been particularly pro the euro, despite that being in the party that wants to join. I think if a Grexit were to happen, I think Europe, much like any economy, much like any political union, with a determined future, as the euro has, then and by determined I don't mean sort of fate. I mean as in it's determined to survive. The euro will pick itself up and will continue. It will find ways to continue. As with every economy that fails, as with everything, you pick yourself up and you keep going. This nonsense that it will suddenly unravel the whole of the euro, unravel the whole of the EU seems willfully ignorant to the fact that a lot of people
have studied economics at all. You can't have a shared currency without the ability to move money around, as our other person said, like we can within the British Isles. I mean, we're doing it at the moment with Scotland. It's very relevant to what I hope our friend's going to come on to talk about here with the Scottish National Party. At the moment, we are propping up Scotland by sending them money to do things that we can't do in England, like pay for people's prescriptions, like pay for people's university education. And we're doing it to try and keep the SNP in the Union. The Scotland, I know it's mostly run by the SNP these days. If we say no to all this stuff, they'll go, right, we're going to go away. We're going to leave the Union. And we are bribing them with all this stuff to stay in the Union. But the European Union is not prepared to do the same bribing. Germany needs to open up its coffers. If it wants the euro to survive, it's got to start bribing the Greeks. And they could start by paying back the 120 billion that the Germans forced the Greek government at gunpoint to lend them during the war. They emptied the coffers of Greece, admittedly run by the Nazi Party, but no attempt has been made to return any of that money. That would go a long way to solving Greece's problems. But no, the Germans go, oh, these Greeks, they are so lazy, they won't work, and they're so corrupt. And of course, if they keep that rhetoric up, the Greeks will go, we don't need the Germans anymore. Bye.
Andrew.
Well, that's simple.
I love the casual sort of xenophobia going on, but let's leave that for another day.
It's not xenophobia. I can get you 500 Germans on the telephone now to say exactly that. That's what the German newspapers say every day about the Greeks. They're lazy, corrupt people. Now, if you keep dissing them like that, they're just going to go away, and your currency will fall apart.
And Joe, I think you said that's you're currently living in Germany. You say that's an accurate reflection of how Germans feel?
I'd say they're just saying just plod along, really. They're just plodding along.
Okay.
They're not very happy.
Andy, considered response to what you've heard.
but I think Paul misses my point. My point is not that I support the euro, not that I think the euro is the best thing since sliced bread, not that I think it's it's got a bright and positive future. It's that if there is a way to keep it going, there will the countries involved, Merkel, France, Germany, will keep it going. They will find a way to keep
Yes,
it going.
and unemployment in the Mediterranean countries will just keep rising and rising until the kids go out on the street and start burning stuff again.
Probably less, but
okay. Here's the point for all of you. I just want to see if anyone wants to answer this. The problem in Greece surely is that when they joined the euro, they were suddenly very greedy. They could get all the things that they hadn't got before because they were in a less developed economy compared to the likes of Germany and Finland and so on. They could do so with the fact they now had a high-value currency and low interest rates. And when things went a bit belly up, suddenly they're having to pay for it. I mean, literally having to pay for their excesses. And the fact that they didn't pay income tax. Is this not just desserts for their own greed?
And they looked at what people were doing in Germany and France, and they said, we want some of that. That's human nature. That's not greed. That's this other guy can go out and buy a BMW. I want a BMW. That's not greed. Now, there are some serious problems in the whole of the Mediterranean with the way that government officials choose to conduct themselves. That does need addressing, but I suggest that if they don't start behaving themselves soon, that's going to get addressing by people being pulled out of parliamentary meetings and beaten up, because this is the problem. Politicians are getting more and more unpopular down there. SYRIZA have been given a chance because the rest of them are such a shower.
Thank you. Right, a few more comments people have made, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the panel. I'll come to Paul. Oh, yes, I'll come to Joe next. There have been lots of comments on this one. Robert Winfield, I have mixed feelings. Surely no Conservative can support many of SYRIZA's ideas, but EU dogma must be opposed. At Blue Liberal 1, 3% primary budget surplus with 25% unemployment is nonsensical. Where are we? And of course, he says the EU dogma, Leon French, EU dogma ought to be opposed, but we also have to be realistic as well. John Hudson saying Brexit won't affect the rest of the EU is silly. The Spanish are wanting to follow them now. Ian at A Confused Ninja agrees with you, Andy, so you're not entirely alone there. And where are we? Chris G. No, what's everyone's thought on having Euro bonds for the Eurozone? Asks Lily, who's another former guest of ours. Hello, Lee. I'm not sure we have time to cover that one. And I'm a bit mean, says Leon French, and I do think the Greeks have been a bit greedy, to be honest. It's always nice to know someone agrees with me. Joe, you wanted to add something.
Yes, I wanted to add on what Paul said, actually, and agree with him with the sort of underlying governmental issues that they have, actually, because we used the example of Podemos earlier with Spain. The reason for that is the underlying corruption, the lies within government. They are lying. The economics have been brought out in reports, and they've been technically, and in regards to the Germans, I come again, they do feel confident, but in regards to Greece, they don't feel like they just don't want to pursue handouts. Generally, the Germans are very incompetent to pursue anything or be adventurous with things. They're just simply not like that. A bit like France as well, surprisingly, or any other Euro country. But yeah, that's what me.
Could I just make one last final point, because several people have used the word Maoist like it's a dirty word. The European Parliament is riddled with Maoists. Barroso was a Maoist. There's an awful lot of Maoists who've wheedled their way into the European Union because it's an absolutely perfect place for people who believe in big government and taking all the money off the people and then handing it back to them in dribs and drabs. So, of course, the EU is full of Maoists. It'll be interesting to see what happens when the Maoists in the SYRIZA coalition sit down with the European Union and all try and work out how to steal everybody's money off them and only give little bits of it back to us if we're really good boys and toe the government line.
I thought Barroso was being slagged off for being too neoliberal by the European left.
Well, look up his history. He's a Maoist.
Okay, and on that, I'm going to ask Sam to close this topic, please.
I think to close, basically what Robert Winfield said, no real conservative, well, from my point of view as well as Robert's, no real conservative should really support what SYRIZA's views are. But yeah, we do have to really, challenge the EU on it, on what they're trying to do. Although I think the euro, yeah, I'm not a fan of the euro. You might have guessed. I wouldn't really cry if the euro collapsed, but I don't think it will. I am more in line with what Andy said, as opposed to what Paul said on this. I think maybe for a different reason. I think they're a determined bunch in the EU. I think they'd find a way to keep it going. In the European Parliament, Barroso's always talking about the project. That's what matters to them. So while I agree with Paul in that it's, they've not really got people's interests at heart, I agree with Andy in that they'll find a way to keep it going. And that's why I think SYRIZA's hit a roadblock, really, because at the end of the day, the EU can survive, the euro can survive without SYRIZA, without Greece, and if it comes to it, I think that's what they'll try and do.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next topic then, chosen by the infallible laser selection process, which Lily enjoys so much, is going to be led, in fact, by Paul, but I think he's currently tweeting.
Yeah, I found a nice little link for you all to look at on Manuel Barroso's past. So if you go to @Whiffin, which is nice.
1976.
Yeah, if you go to @Whiffin and look at my Twitter page, you'll find a link that you can all find. And I'm just coming back to you now. Forgive me, I'm kind of new to this technology.
So I will, and of course you're accessing us via mobile tonight, which makes it a bit more difficult to do.
I seem to have gone green.
That's fine. You look all right to us.
Oh, well, because it's just my phone then. But it's amusing if I'm now going to talk about the total fiction that is climate change, that somebody from the other side has got in and made my screen look all green. So I just had to sit through. I have a very favourite programme on British television called Country File, and normally it's full of beautiful rolling hills and sheep, and occasionally it has to deal with things like should we shoot badgers or not. But tonight it's been turned into the last desperate attempt to keep these green subsidies, which are killing pensioners every day. So we're all paying far too much for our fuel now, and there's really only one reason, because all the cost of petrol's come down, so that's no longer why we're paying huge energy bills. The reason we're paying for it is these ghastly aberrations on the landscape, which I'm constantly amazed that environmentalists are in favour of, because they blight the landscape from an aesthetic point of view, but even if you are strange enough to find them beautiful, they kill birds, they cause bats to explode, and now we find that pensioners are dying every day because of fuel poverty. And on these freezing cold days that we've had recently, all these wind turbines aren't moving because we're in an anticyclone, and when you're in an anticyclone, there aren't any winds. So what's happened? Has anybody come out and said, look, I'm afraid we got it wrong, we're going to pull them all down, and we're going back to energy that can be relied on? No, they're now pumping the propaganda out in any program that they can find to desperately try and get us to all stump up all these green subsidies for technology that just doesn't work.
Thank you very much, Paul. I've tweeted. There's always a slight delay here. The comments we've had so far are from Salman Anwar. I've just turned on Spectrum Debates, and this is at S_Anwar95. Just turned on Spectrum Debates to hear the lie that is climate change. Oh, shut up! It's too much nonsense for a Sunday. We like some robust.
Yeah, that's the level of debate that you get from warmists.
Do we have? We're coming to Andy in a second. Leon French, do we have two people on the panel who really are on the complete opposite of each other? Really? He's a bit surprised because we were a little bit in agreement the other week with him. And I have retweeted your link from before, by the way, Paul. And incidentally as well, a few interesting comments so far on my hoodie. Thanks very much indeed. It's very encouraging, and I think this means I'm now cool. But to try and heat this debate up on climate change, did you like that segue? I'm going to go over to Andy.
Right. Okay. So let's nail this debate on climate change. There is a scientific consensus that climate change is happening, that it is
bought and paid for by governments.
Yeah, the only people who oppose the only people who oppose it are the people who are paid by the oil companies, for goodness sake.
Listen,
hang on one sec. Hang on one sec, Andy. Paul, we'll give Andy a chance to give his argument, and
how's he going to prove that I'm paid for by an oil company? Because I'd really like to know where the check is.
Well, that's okay. I don't think he's accusing you personally. So let's let him get his argument out, and then you can have a chance at the end. Andy.
Right, there has been a global temperature rise of up to 1 degree over the last year. Yes, the science is new. Yes, the science is changing. Yes, there has been problems. I'm not going to deny any of that. But there is generally a consensus that human-made action is helping climate change. Now let's get on to wind farms. Right, a modern wind farm, I know this for a fact, produces electricity 70 to 85% of the time. It has a generating load of about 30% compared to a normal power plant, which has about 50%. So yes, they're not quite as efficient as other power means, but they do have the advantage that they will get better with research, time and money. B, wind will simply never run out. This nonsense that they kill bats, they kill birds, they cause epilepsy. There's no proof. There's no, birds aren't stupid enough to fly into these things, they fly over them. And I mean, you're talking about killing bats, but bats come out at night. There's no wind at night.
What? This is the level of your science. There's no wind at night.
Hang on. Andy, I think you might want to clarify that last part.
I might want to clarify, no. I might want to take that bit back. I'll get it back.
But if we're going to have a debate, let's have a debate.
No proof. Having lived in Cornwall for 8 months, lived pretty much on top of wind farms for 8 months, surrounded by them, I've yet to see any real evidence of noise, of the breaking, of dead animals, of massive disturbance. And they're doing generally harnessing a resource which will never run out. I mean, even if you don't believe in climate change, you understand surely that that the planet's energy resources aren't infinite, and we might as well try and use something that is infinite.
Okay, so what do these wind farms do when they're not running? They use fossil fuels like gas turbines to replace the thing. Tonight on Country File, they're also talking about paying them not to generate and to switch them off because they're generating energy at the wrong time when the grid doesn't need it. They are a complete joke, and the BBC disappear any reputable scientists who say otherwise. When did you last see David Bellamy on the television? He said once that wind farms don't work. He's been completely disappeared. Sir Patrick Moore was under blackmail that if he ever discussed climate change, he believed that the sun is the sole driver of the temperature of this planet, they would cancel the sky at night. He told me that personally. He wasn't allowed to discuss the topic ever on air, on pain of the sky at night being pulled on. This is being run by a cartel of people who want to drive the green agenda, but they've lost sight of all the important things in the green agenda, like rainforests, because they've all got in their bonnet that carbon is a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's plant food. And can we please stop pretending that carbon dioxide is a danger to this planet? Let's talk about the mercury in the light bulbs that we now have in our homes because we have to save electricity.
Paul,
start
can I ask a
developing
question?
new technologies,
Yeah.
not old ones.
Can I ask a question, Paul? Because Andy raised the point and said that the only people who oppose it are those who've been bought by the oil companies, and you took him to task over that. Who is behind a conspiracy in favour of green energy and climate change? I mean, who's
It's
actually
really
making money
easy.
from it?
The people in the coalition are our biggest problem here. They are paying people to not produce energy other ways, and they are paying them to put up these ruddy wind turbines. The landowners are making a killing from the subsidies, and the amount of energy being delivered to the national grid is appallingly low, and it's appallingly low when we need it most, like right now.
Yeah, but if what you're saying is true, and I'm not going to argue with you on that score because I don't have details in front of me. But if what you're saying is true, surely that's just incompetence and not a conspiracy.
No, well, the conspiracy is that you can only get a grant to study anything if you phrase it in terms of climate change. Try and get a grant to study the mating habits of squirrels, you won't get it. But if you ask for a grant to study how climate change is affecting the mating habits of squirrels, hey presto, ting, here's your money, now go off and find us the results you want.
Okay.
Why do they keep tinkering with the results? Because they've been paid to produce the right results.
Okay.
The payola is going on from governments to scientists, not from big oil to people like me who sit and freeze in the winter because I can't afford my bloody energy bills.
Okay, Andy, response from you to that, then I'm going to read some of our Twitter comments.
The idea that there is some sort of conspiracy to block any of the research, this coordinated conspiracy across thousands of universities, thousands of higher education facilities, thousands of awarding bodies, is tinfoil hat nonsense. The reason why that these people are getting grants, the reason why, because it is new science, it is a new area to explore.
It's not science. The hypotheses don't support conclusion, so it's not science.
Let him respond.
In science, you make hypotheses. You don't change the data when the data doesn't fit the hypothesis. You change the hypothesis. I studied as a scientist. This is not science. This is buying results for government.
Okay, you've had a good old go on this one, Paul. You've had a good old go on, Paul.
It's my topic.
It is.
It's my topic.
And you will get the last word at the end of it as well. So you will get the last word. But let's have everyone else have an undisturbed say. But you get to close the topic as well. Don't forget, Andy.
The reason is, despite what Paul says, grants are given to those who are discussing new and interesting areas, advancing knowledge that we simply don't have at the moment. That is why they're getting them. There is no coordinated conspiracy, because it would need a level of coordination simply beyond human capability, frankly.
What, more than oil people sending money to people like me in brown paper envelopes?
I'm not
when
saying,
they don't even know.
I never said that.
That's a much bigger conspiracy. That's a much bigger conspiracy.
I didn't say individuals. I said generally scientists under the funding of oil companies.
Okay, let's have a break and read a few of the comments that people, because this has been even more popular than the last one, and I'm not going to get through anything like half of what people have said so far. John Mousley, can we all agree to say fighting the destruction of the environment is good, but doing in the name of climate change isn't helping?
Bravo.
William Brown, Paul has lost quite a lot of credibility. Leon French, can I ask a question? Can we listen to someone other than Paul? This is fast becoming the Paul show. Please, where are we? I miss Sir Patrick Moore, says John Mousley. Liam, oh dear, there are so many here. Chris G, wind farms are a monstrosity. UK government should stop hurting the economy in order to send signals to bigger polluters. William Brown, Andy, industrial wind turbines are a fallacy to an extent, however tidal isn't and is constant. And there are lots of others. I'm doing my best to retweet all of them if people have things to say on it. Joe, Sam, would either of you like to add anything?
Who would you like to go first?
Joe.
All I'd say is the main fear for me is resources, not climate change. The fact that fossil fuels are diminishing, the fact that rainforests are potentially diminishing. That is a fear. I fear for the prices of our oil to go up. But of course, we've got fracking. But that's a different debate, isn't it? I would say, is it? Would that be a different debate? I have no idea.
Well, you can include it where you like, but
okay, but for frack's sake, let's talk about it anyway. Yes, yeah, but it's a potential to gain in our economy and jobs as well. But that's all I can really say on this matter. I'm not a climate change environmentalist.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Climate change wise, I can't pretend that energy and energy policy is anything that I've really taken a massive interest in. So over the years, so I can't really say too much on it. Apart from that, when I'm not exactly that knowledgeable on the subject, I do tend to look at the prevailing outcome of the research that's been done on it, and that does point towards some form of global warming. So I take that as my base position. When it comes to forms of energy, wind turbines, I've never really seen. I'm not one of these people who says, "Oh, they're ugly, get rid of them." They don't particularly bother me, but I just think there seems to be more efficient ways of getting our energy. Fracking when it's safe, when all the tests are done to make sure that it's not going to affect, can be really beneficial. And nuclear energy as well, clean air energy. That Alton Towers mug's brilliant. So I didn't even know you had that. Nuclear energy as well. I think that's something we need to look at. I know people point to Japan and say, "Oh God, no, it's nothing we should be doing." In Britain we don't have tsunamis, and I don't think we'd be daft enough to put a nuclear power station by the coast. So,
yes.
I think there are other ways of looking at our energy.
Thank you. A few of the points people have made here. Adam Wordsworth, climate change doesn't exist versus wind doesn't exist at night. Is there a happy medium out there? Liam Bones, the only problems with renewable energy are storing it on a large scale and the cost to set up. It will be effective when we invest enough money in it so we can store it. Then when it's not windy, we can still use the stored power. Yes, there's a lot coming through here. Just two quick points. First of all, I'm not. This is actually a normal-sized cup. I just happen to be a mid. I'm really quite small. That's the first thing. The second thing is the point I'd like to make here. Trying to lighten the mood. The point I'd like to make here is: does it actually even matter if you agree with climate change, that climate change is happening or not? Would it not actually just be prudent to say, I don't want our energy resources, the lights in our homes and the energy to our factories, to be reliant on people like Vladimir Putin, for example? And I'd much rather be able to source more of our own energy, to be able to utilize those things that we know don't cause long-term damage to the environment. Is that not just a good thing in general? And I'd ask you, Paul, to store that up for your reply in a moment.
Will do.
With everything else. Anyone else a final point before Paul closes this part of the debate?
Just before I sound like a wind nut, I do actually support an energy mix. I do think nuclear is an answer, but generally, let's use the resources that are unlimited rather than rely on, as Gareth says, energy from nutters.
Thank you very much indeed. I think energy from nutters is a new policy proposal that we should be putting forward. No more energy from nutters. Right, Paul, as promised, you get the last uninterrupted word on this topic.
Great, because there was a lot of sense spoken in the second half, and I shut up rather than because you asked me to. First of all, tidal is a much more sensible alternative. It's certainly a lot better than offshore wind, which just moves the eye source somewhere else. There's something that might foreshadow our talk about the SNP. If Alex Salmond and his other fishy sidekick had any interest in Scotland's primary industry of tourism, they'd be looking at hydroelectric power, which is extremely successful in Switzerland. Switzerland gets most of its power from hydroelectric. Scotland and Wales are perfect places for hydroelectric power, and And the guy who said he doesn't want to rely on energy from Putin, why do you think Germany are in such problems with Putin? They really went for wind turbines. You go over Germany now, the whole country is absolutely covered with them. They're not working for them. All the green technology companies are going bust or pulling out. And Germany are completely reliant on Putin's gas now because they sold themselves to the jolly green giants, and they can't actually make up their shortfall in wind. So you have to look at the consequences of these actions. And the people who say, oh, well, isn't it just better if we play it safe, because maybe carbon is a horrible poison after all, if those people want to kill off their old age pensioners with these high energy fuel bills at this time of year, in case we're making the world a better place in 200 or 300, worse place in 200 or 300 years' time, then I can't agree with that, because I quite like my old age pensioners and I want them to stay around rather than dying of hypothermia.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Paul. And a quick point here, Joe's just telling us that Germany is now reliant on Russia. A third of their gas comes from Russia, mostly to supply the east of that country. Our next topic then, using the laser selection method, is going to be opened by Joe. And again, there is now some debate going on online about the genuine size of both my mug and me. The only people I know of here who will actually know the truth are Sam and Joe. Although they've only seen me, they've never seen the mug in real life. Joe.
I was going to say, does that relate to the face or the mug? I'm sorry.
Oh, careful! Open your topic.
Okay, right. We're going to talk about extremist sort of groups and little groups of the sort of thing. But anyway, we can talk about the Front National and Pegida, because that's what I know about mostly. But the rise of these sort of groups and why, basically. First of all, the failure in France is basically the failure to see the traditions and the problems have not been solved or seen. They wish to stick to traditions, and they are very, very, very proud of their traditions. And therefore they stick to them. They stick to these traditions. They don't want to move away from these traditions. And mainly why this is happening is basically because of the economic failure, and whatever the left or the right, they still stick to a higher taxation. And 57% in 2013 of income was taxed. And that therefore leads to an economic plan which is not geared to empty the pockets or make people save their pennies. Therefore, we have unemployment to talk about. Businesses can't afford to keep on people because taxes are a little bit too high. And with 10% roughly, therefore people are discontented with that, and therefore they want to vote someone else. They vote for the Front National. They vote for Marine Le Pen. And I suggest Marine Le Pen because she has had the higher success rate in votes, even higher than Jean-Marie, who got in 2002. The reason I would say she is popular, the comparative form of that, is because her narrative has become a little bit softer. She has described borders and immigration as a filter, rather than saying F off to immigrants. Basically, that was the narrative of that. But also, I come to Pegida. The reason for this is perhaps it's an East German phenomenon, and in comparison to the rest of Germany, Pegida is very unpopular. And in regards to it being an East German phenomenon, you can relate that back to the communist period where borders were enclosed, there was no outlook to the others, and therefore there is no sort of understanding of other cultures, shall we say. Of course, that's a little bit thumbed down on them. But you can also look at the unemployment rate of, again, the similar economic circumstances. You'll be surprised that the unemployment rate is such a vast difference. You go from 3.6 in Bavaria to 11% in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is in the East German. And also you look at Berlin as well. That's a 10.5% unemployment rate. In comparison to Paris, yes, Paris in France, 6.6, and 5.8 in London, as percentages, of course. But therefore people will be unhappy. That is why I'm unhappy with their circumstances and also with their personal circumstances economically.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Comment so far, John Mousley. Rise of extremists. Remember when we were told the EU would bring us all together? And he has tweeted a frankly terrifying photo montage of many Nigel Farages. I think even the most ardent fan of Mr. Farage would find that a little bit disturbing. Sam.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what people were saying in the debate about SYRIZA, really. Parties like that, whether they're economically left-wing or right-wing, always manage to turn unemployment and the misfortune of unemployment into something which they can campaign on in a social, paint as a social cost of immigration and things like that. Certainly, that's what Marine Le Pen's done in France, and it comes down to race relations as well. Pegida certainly, and people they link the two really. A lot of the things you see coming from sort of like the mob online is that it's not just immigrants taking jobs; it's Muslim immigrants who can come and do that. People tend to take any little difference in times like this, in times of austerity, and they just try and turn it into a political point to campaign on, and unfortunately sometimes it can pay off for them, like Marine Le Pen.
Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Anyone else want to talk at this point?
I will, if nobody's going to accuse me of keep jumping in.
Please do, Paul. Go ahead. Go on.
Okay, well, let's talk about the situation in France first. Nobody gives a damn about unemployment in France because they all get such ludicrously high payments for being unemployed. The rise of the Front National in France is nothing whatsoever to do with unemployment. It's to do with the fact that they have half the population of Algeria living amongst them and running around shooting people for things like drawing cartoons. The rise of the Front National is a direct correlation between Islam in France and the Front National, and it's going to get worse the more that these crazy people go around trying to kill people for anything they might do wrong, whether it's being gay or being a woman or getting yourself raped. And until somebody starts addressing the fact that Islam wants special treatment and wants a get-out-of-jail-free card from all of our long historically developed civilized practices in our Western countries, France will just continue to see the rise and rise of the National Front. And it's nothing to do with Marine Le Pen modifying her father's message. Their message has always been the same. We want traditional French values, and they're being ridden roughshod over. Now, the reason it's happening more in East Germany is, you're absolutely right, it's because they weren't used to being treated like this under communism. Under communism, they were told the borders are locked, you can't get out. So they're just happy now that they can leave the areas where they don't want to be, and that's why they don't like it when people move into... The reason that East Germany has so many immigrants is because there's so many empty buildings, because most people went to live in West Germany where all the work was.
Thank you very much indeed. Joe?
Right, I'd like to say that probably the traditions in France do actually cause why they can't integrate as well. You look at how France is a secular state. Let's look at the situation in schools. They well, sometimes they don't, and also regarding the sort of ban on the veil, whatever your view on that is. But the rulings comply to this as you can't wear religious symbols in public places, and this is sort of a small link, I would suggest, to integration problems. Perhaps not being a secular state would help with this, as an example. Of course, it's a small suggestion.
Thank you very much. Andy has appeared and disappeared, and I think he's trying to come back. A couple of the points people have made online so far. John Mousley, people have gradually seen their choices matter less and their leaders ignore their concerns more and more, and you reap as you sow, Europe. Salman Anwar, Islam does not want special treatment. You know nothing about Islam. Leon French, the Charlie Hebdo killers were French. So there's some mixed feelings on this one here. I was going to go to Andy, but I think he's having some difficulties at this point in time. Anyone else want to comment on this one? No? Well, Andy's not coming back. I think we might be drawing to an end of this one, then. This might not be a very long one. So there we are. Joe, did you want to round up?
Well, I can swiftly do so. I say the economic problems has created a scapegoat, and therefore people want to vote to get that scapegoat out. But more so, the sort of traditions sometimes created because they're very stubborn to move with modern times, and especially with a solution to the economic problems. But also, there are reasons why there's sort of the poles, the pillars of what makes these things happen. Whatever the case, you see, whether it's 2002 or 2015 or 17, should I say? So yeah, that's me.
Thank you very much indeed, Joe. Andy, I think is here. Can you hear us, Andy?
I can speak.
We'll give it a try in a sec. Just a few of the other comments then that people have made. Chris G. The National Front used to attack the Jews. Now they attack the Muslims. And he's saying that you might be siding with them, Paul. John Mousley. Remember when Fox News got laughed at for saying there were ghettos in Paris? Weren't those happy times? Ian, a confused ninja. During harsh times, we see a rise in extremist or traditional views. We become afraid of change we've seen it happen before. Yes, and I now seem to have two Andrews, which of course is always interesting. While we're waiting for Andrew to settle in, can I just remind anyone, if you have something you'd like to write about, a short or long blog posters on any issue whatsoever, local, national, international, we'd very much welcome you to publish it on spectrumdebates.com, and in around about 1 minute's time on spectrumdebates.com, the poll will open asking who your favourite debater was tonight. And let's see if Andy can pull a few points on this one, as he's about to open the last topic for discussion. Andy.
First of all, really, how's the technical thing work?
Fire away, Andy. What's your topic?
Can you hear me first?
We can, yes.
Sorry, yeah, a bit of a problem. I think the SMP guy I live with probably pulled the internet. No, you didn't really. I shouldn't say that. So I would like to introduce the thought about the SMP and how damaging they are generally for the UK and for British politics. We all know that following the referendum, that the SNP have had somewhat of a meteoric rise to power, to popularity, I should say, and they're about to head to sort of a meteoric rise to power in Scotland. I'd be very surprised if they didn't take over a few seats in Scotland, maybe up to 50. And I think this is going to be grossly damaging not only to British politics, but to government running the country and generally to politics of the future as well. It's going to mean probably going to mean the end of stable government if the SNP refuse to join any coalitions. It's going to mean the end. It's going to mean the end of the Labour Party generally. I mean, and I'm no Labour fan, but I still think we need views across the spectrum. And I think they are a complete and utter terrifying waste of space.
Thank you very much indeed. I think it's. I'm quite sorry we don't have Chris Keane on with us this week.
I'm hoping you'll come with the comments.
Yeah, well, I think he might be working or something tonight because he's normally there, and I haven't seen him tonight. So the question is the SNP bad for Scotland? Are they a dangerous waste of space? Anyone want to add something to this one?
May I?
Joe?
Well, it's just a quick point. As somebody who's a believer of if people vote for who they deserve, they vote for SNP. They suffer the consequences of the SNP like we voted for Labour in '97. So basically, that's my point. If they wish to vote SNP, then believe in democracy and go forth with that.
Thank you very much indeed. John Mousley makes the point. They're very damaging. Let us cast our minds back. The SNP lost their one reason to exist in the referendum. Let us all agree to ignore them for a generation. Is that realistic, Paul?
No, I think we should encourage them because they will save us. They're the only thing that can save us from Ed Miliband. Which is why Ed Miliband is courting them so furiously at the moment, because he's desperate. You know, he ought to be running away with the polls for this next election, but he's such a wet weekend that he can't do anything on his own. Now, the brilliant thing is they are SYRIZA, right? So the SNP are SYRIZA. If you think they're anything else, it's we haven't had enough and we want some more. So the SNP, we hand them a huge budget to give away for education and health and all these other issues. And then the Scots go, oh, look how brilliant the SNP are for Scotland. And they vote them in and they vote Labour out. And we might just survive and continue in recovery, unlike the rest of Europe, which is going down the Swanee, if the SNP prevent Labour getting into power. So I'm all for, but send them a bit more cash so that more people vote SNP in Scotland. Because at the end of the day, we can fix Scotland's problems if they mess up. Was it what, 6 million people? If the SNP turn it into a complete graveyard, we can fix it in a couple of weeks once the people have realised what's going on. In the meantime, we have some much bigger issues to worry about down here, like keeping the recovery going, like employment. And if we can just avoid the complete and total disaster of the spend other people's money socialists getting back in one more time, then we might actually end up as the powerhouse of Europe, and they'll actually want to stay with us. That's my opinion. Bring it on, Alex, and what's her name, Sturgeon or something. You know, these ridiculous people are actually doing us a big, big favour down in England.
I would. I think you forget that, you know, the SNP have said absolutely that they won't go into any coalition with the Tories. They've said they will not have a formal coalition with Labour. You know, if the SNP have, you know, 40, 50 seats here, and and that means that Labour won't be able to form a majority. The Tories are so unpopular that, you know, they won't be able to form a majority.
So then we'll get a Tory UKIP coalition, which would have two parties pulling in the same direction instead of what we've had for the last 5 years, which is the Lib Dems pulling in the opposite direction and very little getting done. We haven't had enough cuts because the Lib Dems squealed every time. The only thing they cut was education budget, and of course they lost all their voters with that, so that's the end of them. So, you know, a Tory UKIP coalition might actually get something done.
Right. I mean, a Tory UKIP coalition relies on the fact that UKIP are going to have more than 2 or 3 MPs.
Well, you keep sticking your head in the ground, Sunshine. That's what they've said about SYRIZA. That's what they say about the National Front. If you keep laughing at parties with a genuine protest vote, then you
I'm not laughing at...
Toby, you've forgotten what happened on May the 22nd last year? UKIP beat every other party into a cocked hat. I am no longer a member of UKIP. But the more people poke fun at them, the more people that say, oh, they're never going to get anywhere seriously, the more the common man goes, do you know what? If they're dissing them that much, I'm going to give them a go, because none of the rest of them are listening to me.
Paul, I'm not laughing at UKIP. UKIP are a serious, dangerous, militant threat. But
they're not at all militant. They're just a bunch of people who've been ignored for years who aren't going to take it anymore.
Can I finish my point?
And if you call them militant, then you've
hang on, I let you finish.
point.
Let me finish mine. Right?
Andrew, go.
The reason those parties and the reason UKIP came to power, the reason the reason that UKIP did so well was because of the voting system that allowed them to do so in preferential, sort of proportional representation elections. In first past the post, where they have to have concentrated support in very small, tight areas, it's going to seriously disadvantage UKIP. And yes, they may win. They may win Douglas Carswell on the back of his personal vote, But Mark Reckless ain't going to hang on. Nigel Farage is going to have a hell of a time trying to get South Fane.
Yeah, I'm really pleased about Al Murray. He's a brilliant intervention there. That should keep Farage out of power, which I'm all in favour of.
Now we've found common ground between Paul and Andy. On that issue, I think so. We sadly not. So I'm going to pause you both there. I'm going to read a few comments because I want us to savour this moment. A few of the other comments we've got here. John Mousley, it's not a rise to power for the SNP. They've just retained all their voters from the referendum, unlike the other parties. Bad losers is all it is. Leon French, I find the SNP quite irritating, to be honest. Whinging swine. John Mousley, the age of the SNP is the age of stable right-wing government. The Tories, the Ulster Unionists or DUP and UKIP. Cameron S at Cameron_surname. The SNP have one policy, which is destroy the UK. If they succeed through post-election deals, they will have won and Scotland will have lost. Apparently, Paul, you make Daniel want to emigrate to Sweden. Because he thinks that UKIP will be lucky to have more than 5 MPs. Salman Anwar thinks that UKIP will get 2 seats and therefore won't really be able to form a coalition. And so on. So yes, there we are. Those are our comments so far. Sam?
Yeah, I think basically after the indie ref, I think people sort of expected that the SNP would fall away. I don't know, maybe I misjudged the move there. I thought a loss would mean that the SNP go away, but I think the gap was 10 points, and you thought, okay, maybe a bit closer than expected. And now the narrative's completely shifted. It's gone from people thinking, back in 2011, the SNP somehow got a majority. Oh, well, fair enough. We'll see how well that goes for the next time. For the 2016 Holyrood elections, you'd have to be mad to think that the SNP won't get a majority now, quite comfortably as well. But I think it's something's got to give. I don't think that you can have an SNP that's that strong and a Scotland that is either in the union or not baying all the time for a second indie ref. And I know the SNP say now that they wouldn't go into a coalition because the Tories are so unpopular. But if the Tories were so, if that was the only viable option, would the SNP really think that it wouldn't be worth going to the Tories and saying, give us a second referendum and we'll vote through your Queen's speech just to keep you in power even for a year?
It's an interesting point.
Would the SNP really not go for that deal?
Yeah, it's an interesting point that I don't know what anyone else thinks, because Leanne Wood, the leader of Plaid Cymru, was being interviewed today, and she reiterated a similar view to the one expressed by the SNP, in that they will not support a Conservative government. Well, of course, that leaves both of those parties. I think most would agree the SNP are likely to have far more seats than Plaid Cymru, but that leaves both of those parties only being able to deal with Labour, which means where's their negotiating power? Where's their bargaining skill gone? If you're only prepared to, in some form or other, work with one party, why should that party actually give you too much? I mean, is this not a tactical error on behalf of the nationalist parties?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, they're going to find it much harder to work with anyone else, but I don't think their aim is to work with anyone else. It's to reassure their base and to continue to agitate.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. Their agenda is to keep niggling at the open wound that the referendum caused. And I'm not at all surprised that the 42% of people who wanted Scotland to leave are up in arms now. Of course, it's poured paraffin on the flames of nationalism. And those parties have a main interest, which is to bring the situation about where they win a referendum. They're not interested in lying down now. You saw what they were like. You know, some of the things that were going on during that referendum were absolutely disgusting, and you know, people were getting all sorts of threats from Scottish nationalists, stuff that if those threats had been made, say, against a religious minority, there would have been a huge outcry. But because it's just we Scots who want to establish their independence, we let them get away with it. I think, Plaid Cymru are going nowhere because they've made such a cock-up of running Wales. Labour in Wales are also in a bad state. I'll go out on a limb and I say that UKIP might get a couple of MPs just in Wales because everyone else in Wales is collapsing.
Thank you very much indeed. Joe, Sam, any final comments before I ask Andy to close our final debate for tonight?
No, not really from me. No, I thought... Yeah, I've said what I need to say. Really, I think that it's going to give eventually, somehow, some way.
Joe,
yes.
Well, the fact that the SNP are not really willing to form a possible government is a sign that they're sticking to their guns. They're going to go forth and do what they like and persevere with their own goals, which is quite admirable. But also regarding Scotland, I love Ruth Davidson. That's me.
I like Ruth Davidson too.
I've actually met Ruth, and she's one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Who is she?
You know, Ruth Davidson, leader of the Scottish Conservatives.
Yes, that's the one that the fat puff in charge of UKIP in Scotland called a fat lesbian. And when he called her a fat lesbian, he said, "But I'm just telling the truth. I'm a fat puff, she's a fat lesbian." And of course, there was a massive hoo-ha about that.
Yes. I don't really. Yes, I think that sort of explains itself.
You spend power on David Coburn's internalized homophobia.
Or we could ask you to close this debate. Andrew, close this debate, please.
I'll come back to you in a moment, Paul. Yeah, I think the danger is with the SNP, isn't that, for the next 3 or 4 years at a time when we need stability, something which this coalition has provided coalitions, that the SNP are going to rule out stable government. Nobody will be able to form a majority, especially with Lib Dem losses, with Labour losing seats in the north. So I have to declare that SNP are generally dangerous to the economy, not just of Scotland, but generally of the entire UK.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you all very much indeed for your comments. They were coming thick and fast earlier on. I could not keep up. Very, very grateful. Very grateful to all of my guests tonight. Thank you to Andrew, to Joe, to Paul, to Sam. And just a quick reminder to all of you, we're back next week at 8 o'clock with another general debate show. If you'd like to be involved, I've already got one place filled by a Green parliamentary candidate. Get in touch, reserve your place, and you can appear down here next week. Our website is up, taking on this particular point about the SNP and UKIP and how many seats people may or may not win. William Brown at W_O_Brown has a blog post on spectrumdebates.com on this very topic. Do go and have a look. Do go and vote on that. Do go and submit your blog posts to us on whatever you'd like to. We would welcome them from right across the spectrum. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is SD14. That's Spectrum Debates for tonight. Have a great Sunday evening. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.